I recently caught a 70mm screening of Apocalypse Now, and other than the absolute chode who requested the theater turn down the volume during the beach invasion scene, it was an incredible experience. Every shot looks amazing, every second Robert Duvall is on screen is solid gold, every word out of Brando's mouth is haunting. I could go on. Apocalypse Now is an adaptation of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, a turn-of-the-century novella about Captain Marlowe's journey up the Congo River in pursuit of the mysterious ivory trader Kurtz. As Marlowe ventures deeper into the jungle, he descends further into the depths of madness and confronts the primal, savage core of humanity. Apocalypse Now broadly follows the same narrative structure, except instead of late 19th century Africa, it's set during the Vietnam War. But with this viewing, I noticed there's another book that reveals a crucial layer of meaning to this sprawling masterpiece, a book that, apparently, Kurtz himself has been reading, The Golden Bough by Sir James George Frazer. This work, quite possibly one of the most influential texts of the 19th century, not only decodes the enigma of Marlon Brando's Kurtz, but illuminates Apocalypse Now's enduring relevance as a quintessential American myth. Let's dive in.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
But first, a quick recap. Apocalypse Now follows Captain Benjamin Willard, an American operative stationed in Saigon during the Vietnam War. One day, he's tasked with a mission to travel up the Nung River to Mongolia and assassinate a rogue American Special Forces commander named Kurtz, who's lost his mind and commands an army of Montagnard tribesmen.
Terminate with extreme prejudice.
So Willard assembles a patrol boat crew and embarks on a perilous journey upriver. Along the way, they encounter a series of increasingly surreal and dangerous scenarios, including a colonel who wipes out an entire Vietnamese beach town so he can surf, a chaotic USO show, and a close encounter with a tiger. The voyage claims the lives of many in Willard's crew. Eventually, they arrive at Kurtz's compound, where he is worshipped as a genius and a god. After enduring a period of brutal imprisonment, Willard carries out his orders and assassinates Kurtz. In the aftermath, the Montagnard bow to Willard, revering him as their new leader. Willard and his sole surviving crew member leave the compound and depart back down the river as Kurtz's final words echo, Part of what makes Apocalypse Now so brilliant is that Coppola doesn't just adapt the narrative structure of Heart of Darkness, but also its thematic core. He takes a revered novella critical of European colonial rule in Africa and transposes that critique to America's war efforts in Vietnam. Just as Conrad illustrated that the so-called civilizing mission of European imperialism was a facade concealing exploitation and violence, Coppola suggests that the US intervention in Vietnam was a similar exercise in violence disguised as liberation. Moreover, both Marlowe and Willard's journey upriver represent a gradual stripping away of civilization's veneer, revealing the primal drives lurking beneath the surface of humanity. In Heart of Darkness, the jungle is described in increasingly primeval terms as they go upriver, and in Apocalypse Now, there's a similar metaphorical travel back in time. The boat is vandalized, so they have to replace the canopy with leaves. Lance, once a celebrity surfer playboy,
let's go surfing now, everybody's learning how,
increasingly sheds this identity and takes on a more tribal look. Even military structure gradually devolves into chaos.
Who's the commanding officer here?
Ain't you?
When Willard reaches Kurtz's compound, he arrives at the terminus of mankind's regression to its primitive origins, a violent, technologically barren realm where one man is worshipped as a deity. The obvious interpretation here is that war, a practice as old as humanity itself, is the ultimate manifestation of our stubborn adherence to primal impulses. Transplanting these themes to the Vietnam War reinforces the notion that conflict is a tragically enduring facet of our nature. And while that makes sense, there were elements of this final act that seemed to point to something more that always nagged me. Like, why does Kurtz seemingly invite Willard to kill him?
And if you understand me, Willard, you will do this for me.
Why don't the Montagnard, who supposedly revere Kurtz as a god, retaliate when he's murdered? And ultimately, what does Kurtz's murder mean? Well, the answers can be found in the book in Kurtz's room, a book that likely served as a significant source of inspiration for Conrad, The Golden Bough. Published in 1890, The Golden Bough is a monumental study of primitive beliefs, the essence of human culture, and the enduring significance of myth and ritual. Fraser's work is considered one of the foundational texts in the field of comparative mythology and was instrumental in establishing anthropology as an academic discipline. The book's influence rippled through intellectual and artistic circles, captivating the likes of Freud, T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, James Joyce, Emile Durkheim, and Claude Levi-Strauss, just to name a few. The Golden Bough posits that modern civilization was built upon a foundation of primitive magical thinking, and that this thinking still lurks beneath the surface of our world. A central claim in the book is that a fundamental form of human thinking is what Fraser calls sympathetic magic. Sympathetic magic is basically the idea that like produces like, or that imitating a desired outcome can bring it into being. For example, in a rain dance, a tribe may simulate the sound of rain with their feet in the hopes of producing actual rain. Or, voodoo dolls, in which harming the likeness of a person is believed to actually harm the person. Fraser claims that rituals are among the earliest forms of human activity, grounded in attempts to manipulate the natural world through sympathetic magic in order to ensure fertility, secure a successful hunt, or bring about good fortune. Within the primitive societies he studied, Fraser identified a prevalent motif in their mythology he called the dying god, in which one individual is believed to have exceptional prowess in sympathetic magic, meaning the course of nature is more or less under his control, and thus he is revered and protected as a guarantor of the tribe's well-being. This is Colonel Kurtz. Kurtz is revered as a god among the Montagnard, not merely because of his profound and unsettling insights, but because his perceived power serves as a symbolic guarantee that the tribe can exert control over the natural world and ensure its continuity. Crucially, as Dennis Hopper's character notes, Kurtz is dying.
He's dying, I think. He hates all this.
While our modern notion of a god is someone who is eternally worshipped and maybe even invincible, according to Fraser, in primitive cultures it wasn't quite like that. The dying god was a symbol of the natural cycle of growth, decay, and rebirth, particularly in relation to the agricultural cycle. Thus, the god's eventual demise was necessary for the cycle to continue, and a new god would need to emerge to ensure the tribe's prosperity, especially when the old one showed signs of weakness. This is where Willard comes in. Willard's assassination of Kurtz mirrors a particular archetypal myth found across cultures that Fraser focuses the book on, a myth that he identifies as representing a, quote, first crude philosophy of life, the priesthood at Nemi. It goes like this. Per Fraser, within the sanctuary at Nemi grew a certain tree of which no branch might be broken. Only a runaway slave was allowed to break off, if he could, one of its boughs. Success in the attempt entitled him to fight the priest in single combat, and if he slew him, he reigned in his stead with the title of the King of the Wood. The priesthood at Nemi was associated with the worship of Diana, the Roman goddess of the hunt, and the ritual killing of the priest-king was seen as a way of ensuring the fertility of the land and the continuation of the natural cycle. This is essentially the archetypal pattern that is echoed during the climactic confrontation between Kurtz and Willard. Coppola drives this point home when he intercuts Kurtz's assassination with the ritual slaughter of a water buffalo. After the deed is done, the Montagnard bow to Willard as he becomes the new god figure, or King of the Wood. This is why they're not angry about Kurtz's death, as his murder and replacement is part of the cycle of renewal. It's kind of like that South Park episode Britney's New Look, in which the media's obsession with bullying Britney Spears in the late 2000s
Oh boy, what's she done now?
is framed as a ritual sacrifice that ensures a bountiful harvest.
Great harvest, huh?
An incredible harvest.
Britney Spears, or I guess Hollywood celebrity in general, is the dying god that must be killed once they start showing signs that their powers are waning, or in this case, once Britney Spears starts becoming less hot.
Yeah, and she's all fat too.
Then once they're dead, they must be replaced by a younger idol to mirror the cycle of agricultural renewal.
Looks like next harvest will be even better.
This episode, along with the short story The Lottery that it parodies, draw heavily from The Golden Bough. One of Fraser's crucial insights is that ritual precedes myth. First, rituals were performed, and then later, myths emerged to justify them. We don't perform rituals to honor stories, we tell stories to rationalize rituals. When Willard reaches the end of his descent into humanity's cognitive origins, he finds not just brutality, but ritual, or the expression of humanity's deep-seated desire to impose order on the unknown and to try to make sense of the world and our place in it. According to Fraser, this desire led to the development of sympathetic magic, which in turn birthed the concept of metaphor as a means of transferring meaning between domains. The metaphor of the dying god, for instance, was used to explain the cycle of nature. An initial reading of Apocalypse Now is that, despite our pretensions to progress, the brutality of our origins rears its head whenever we go to war. But a perhaps more nuanced reading is that Willard's journey is a descent from myth to ritual, revealing our reliance on metaphor to indulge our primal yearning to make sense of the world. The trappings of civilization, culture, surfing, music, celebrities, military decorum, even the idea of national identity can, for Fraser, be traced back to the initial collective human impulse of sympathetic magic, where imagination was wielded to exert control over a chaotic world. Both Willard and Kurtz begin as part of the US military, an institutional hierarchy that is essentially a myth, an abstraction that we perpetuate as a way to organize society. As Willard travels upriver and reads more about Kurtz's rejection of his military career and ideals, he too begins to question the authority and morality of the institution he represents. By the end, he has shed his identification within this system.
They were gonna make me a major for this. And I wasn't even in their fucking army anymore.
Part of Kurtz's enigmatic allure lies in his cryptic metaphorical language.
Snail. Crawl along the edge. Straight razor. That's my dream.
One could say that when Willard first hears his voice, it's a kind of siren call beckoning him to unearth the hidden primitive origins of humanity's fascination with myths and metaphors.
I'd heard his voice on the tape, and it really put the hook in me.
Now, this phenomenon of ritual preceding myth isn't just confined to ancient civilizations and religious belief. We can see echoes of this same principle in our everyday lives. For example, consider the strange, enduring relevance of the film Eyes Wide Shut, which recently celebrated its 25th anniversary. A surreal odyssey of infidelity, desire, and conspiracy, few other films have sparked the kind of rabid analysis that this film has. A slew of podcasters and YouTubers analyze every frame, every detail, and every line to discern secret messages about the nature and identity of the shadowy powers influencing our world. They justify this ritual of overanalysis with the myth that Kubrick was a mind-boggling genius who obsessed over every detail to embed secret meanings in his work. I mean, I've heard weird things like that Kubrick's mind was so special that he could only handle a wardrobe of 3 shirts and he couldn't drive a car. Don't get me wrong, Kubrick is pound for pound probably the best director to ever live, but all the evidence points to the fact that he was the kind of guy who filmed until it felt right, and then, in his words, let the French critics tell him what it means. The ritual of searching for meaning to make sense of the world, in this case by picking apart Eyes Wide Shut, is then rationalized through the myth that Kubrick was an obsessive cryptic genius. The ritual comes first, the myth follows. One of the reasons Apocalypse Now is remembered as a quintessential movie of the era is because it encapsulates the period's profound moral contradictions, a time marked by both remarkable social progress and unspeakable brutality. This duality mirrors the legacy of the Golden Bough, a text that simultaneously empathizes with humanity's early struggles towards civilization and recoils in horror at the depths of irrationality that underpin our origins. The book is basically a list of examples of barbaric, irrational acts. At one point, Fraser mentions that a man in tribal Australia discovered that his wife laid on his blanket after menstruating, so then he killed her and then died of terror 2 weeks later. This was the cutting edge of knowledge at one point. If humanity could make such remarkable progress despite the depravity of its origins, then Apocalypse Now represents America's grappling with its identity in a time when 2 contradictory truths could coexist: that a nation leading the charge for civil rights, women's liberation, and technological advancement could also be capable of perpetuating horrific violence. Even the psychedelic aesthetic of the film not only captures the experimental spirit of the time, but also reflects the utility of these substances as an intervention to help encounter more fundamental truths. But beyond capturing the zeitgeist of its time, the film continues to resonate decades later because it embodies the very ritual it deconstructs. If primitive myths have a function, what about myths, or in this case movies, about the function of primitive myths? Going to the movies is itself a ritualistic experience. We gather in a darkened room surrounded by strangers and collectively share an experience that on some level cements a sense of communal cohesion. Cinema's unique ideological power, its ability to frame the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and our place in the world, is itself a form of sympathetic magic. We construct and consume stories with moral lessons in the hopes that we can manifest those morals in our own society. In the case of war films, filmmakers recreate horrific conflicts in hopes of promoting peace, that through the telling of these myths, we can contextualize our history, absorb its moral lessons, and actualize them in the future. Like produces like. Fraser argues that the impulse behind sympathetic magic, the desire to control and influence the world, is the same driving force that propelled humanity from the stages of mythology to religion and ultimately to science. He said, magic, like science, assumes a certain established order of nature on which man can surely count and which he can manipulate to his own ends. While The Golden Bough has faced criticism since its publication, its core message remains powerful, that humankind abhors uncertainty, and the imagination will go to extraordinary, even horrifying lengths to convince ourselves that we can conquer it, whether that produce beautiful things like movies or less beautiful things like ritual sacrifice. The horror that Kurtz laments at the end isn't merely the savagery at the heart of humanity, it's the abyss of the unknown and the monstrous potential of the human imagination to fill that dark chasm. Apocalypse Now, a stone-cold capital M masterpiece, is both a testament to the beauty of the imagination and a reminder of the utter horror it can unleash. Hey y'all, thanks for watching. I want to give a shout out to everybody who has visited my Ko-fi page and donated to the channel. Every donation makes a big difference, so thank you, thank you, thank you. Link is below if you'd like to contribute. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an upload. Check me out on Twitch where I'm playing Elden Ring. Follow my movie reviews on Letterboxd. Join my merry gang of nerds on Discord. All those links are below in the description, so be sure to click them all. Hope y'all are staying cool this summer, and I'll see you next time. Peace.